Welcome to the BizVal podcast. At BizVal, we are passionate about empowering entrepreneurs the world over to understand and unlock the value in their business. We work with advisors and entrepreneurs to demystify the value creation process when building a business. At BizVal, we know how tough it is to grow and run a business, which is exactly why we've made valuations simple to understand, accurate, and affordable. Our unique blend of tech and touch ensures that you always receive the best service, authentic human engagement, and data-led insights to ensure that you build a business that provides you with freedom and choice. In the BizVal podcast, we showcase stories of real entrepreneurs and advisors, sharing lessons and inspiration from their journeys to make your journey just that little bit easier. Welcome to the BizVal podcast. This is a show where we talk to the people shaping how businesses are built, bought, sold, and valued. I'm Graham Stephen, the CEO of bizvalglobal.com. And today I'm delighted to be joined by somebody with he doesn't look it at all, but nearly 4 decades of experience in and around business valuations. And he's one of the most active voices globally on what AI means for the profession. So Rod Burkert, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Graham.
So for anyone who doesn't know you yet, and anyone on LinkedIn and has got anything in the M&A, advisory, valuation space, I'm sure they do already. But could you just give us the sort of 2-line version of who you are and what you do today?
Sure. So today, I run a firm called Burkert Valuation Advisors, and I focus primarily on practice management consulting. I'm a big believer in specialization, so I only do this for the BVFLS profession. And really the goal of my firm is to help colleagues turn the practice you have into the practice you want. Whatever that means for them. Do they want more time, more money, more freedom? And since the start of 2025, that work has been really focused on one thing, doing all of that with an assist from AI. So using my traditional coaching, augmenting it with AI to help practitioners use AI to better market, sell, and deliver their services. And I do that through a newsletter. I run monthly group workshops, and I do one-to-one coaching. And as a side note, a colleague and I founded another practice called BVFLS Transitions, which is a firm designed to matchmake baby boomer business valuers who want to sell their practices to the next generation who want to grow and scale a firm.
Fantastic. And I can't wait to dive into, what that means for our profession. I just want to touch on something you mentioned there, Rod, is, we as business valuation professionals, one of the first things we tell our clients is you want to create value, make sure the business isn't dependent on yourself. And it's a bit like the dentist with rotten teeth, right? I'm sure you come across it all the time where we don't take our own medicine. So hopefully there's a lot of insight today. We're going to be focusing, I guess, a lot on AI and what that means for the profession. But before we get into that, let's rewind a little bit. You started at Price Waterhouse. I think it was still called Price Waterhouse then. When I joined them, it was Price Waterhouse Coopers already. When I was still running around in nappies, you were already, getting into the game. So you were doing tax work in Philadelphia and then Brussels. But how did a young accountant or young tax accountant like you end up in valuation?
Well, like you said, I started out in Price Waterhouse. I graduated from college in 1978, and I started working with Price Waterhouse in Philadelphia that summer. And, as you point out, that way back then, it was still the Big 8, not the Big 6, and certainly not the Big 4. And I was doing individual tax work for that's where I started. I actually did spend one busy season in audit and absolutely hated audit. Went downstairs to a tax partner and said, I don't know why, but I think I would really like doing tax work better. And this happened to be, so I started in July of 1978. This is 6 months later in January. So at that time, they're looking for any warm body with a 98.6 degree body temperature to staff the tax department. And so I was lucky. I immediately got absorbed into tax. And one of the cool things that came out of that is I did an overseas stint in Brussels, Belgium for 18 months. And that was a pretty eye-opening experience for a kid right out of college who had never really traveled anywhere outside of the country. And then it was just a succession of, I'll say later, I get bored with the status quo. And so from there, I moved out of public accounting and into industry. And so during that time, I worked for a Fortune 500 specialty steel manufacturer. Don't get excited. We were like 490 something, seriously. So we just made the Fortune 500. And I had various positions in there that allowed me to look at the manufacture of steel from different perspectives. And then I also, in the 1980s, the steel tariffs were a big thing and the company was in a lot of trouble. So I pivoted out of manufacturing and I went into the banking industry. And I worked in something called corporate development, which was my initial exposure to business valuation. So by this time, Graham, we're in the merger mania days of the 1980s, and banks were just starting to be allowed to acquire cross-border banks, meaning, or should say cross-state. But we were also looking at acquiring mortgage banking companies, title insurance companies, equipment leasing companies. And so I got to see how valuations were done at that level. And that's what really triggered my interest in valuation. Somewhere in there along the way, I got an MBA. And at the end of the day, I started doing business. I wanted to do business valuations full time because it brought together the elements of accounting, tax, finance, and economics. And at the time, I just thought it was the most interesting discipline around, and I really fell in love with it.
I mean, you touch on some points. I often have this discussion with people is, at the heart of business valuation is actually, it's a triangulation exercise of finance, operations, business. It's really getting to grips with the business model that underpins the business and then playing that back. And, a lot of people think it's just running a DCF or running a spreadsheet. That's only a tiny portion of it. And I guess having had that experience across domains from tax through to manufacturing, through to banking, you are in that sort of unique position where you can pull that stuff together. Fortunately, you ran away from audit early on. That was probably your saving grace. So Rod, for listeners coming in today, it's a bit of a different world in many ways. But, from that early career and doing your MBA back in the 80s and those sort of early M&A lessons, is there anything from the sort of heyday of the 1980s Wall Street that's still stuck with you today and is still relevant to the profession today?
Well, there's a book called Bright Lights, Big City, and that's exactly how I felt. I mean, I was still pretty young and still learning a lot. And when I was working for this banking company, which was a publicly traded company, I was just smitten, bowled over by these guys coming down from Wall Street and showcasing their valuation models on, when we were trying to acquire these other companies. And that's where I say in my LinkedIn profile, I mean, one of the funny takeaways that I have is if you're a publicly traded company and you're looking at buying a business, it's not about increasing value. It's about not diluting your earnings. And every valuation model that I studied from those Wall Street investment bankers started with an anti-earnings dilution model because you didn't want to go to the street with a story that said, oh, we're acquiring another bank or this other company, and it's going to dilute our earnings by 3% for the next 2 years. And so one of the things that really triggered my interest in doing the valuation was reverse engineering these valuation models that they gave us to look at and study for different targets that we were looking at acquiring.
Fantastic. So let's fast forward a little bit. Well, it's still in the past, but you went solo in July of 2000 with Burkert Valuation Advisors, and for 2 decades you ran your own valuation practice. Okay, so what for you made you decide to take that leap into running your own practice? And what did those early years, or what did those 20 years in the game teach you? I'm sure you got some interesting stories to tell.
Well, yes, I do. And I will tell you that the reason that I started my own valuation practice is I just finally got the confidence to do it on my own. My father, growing up, we were probably lower middle class. I saw what my father went through working for somebody all the time and how he complained when he came home, to be quite frank. And I didn't want that kind of life for me. I learned something early on, that there are very few things that you can't recover from. And so the work, when I was thinking about going out on my own, I thought, well, the worst that can happen is this fails and I go back into industry, or I go back into a public accounting firm. So at the time, I really felt like there was nothing to lose. My very first valuation engagement, Graham, happened to be for a manufacturing company. And we're doing the site visit, we're walking through the plant, and I'm talking to this business owner about the manufacturing lineup and supply chain logistics. And he stops me in the middle of the floor and he says, Rod, you really get this. And I kind of shrugged it off, but it was a sort of a light bulb moment, Graham, that led to specialization. I mean, I had spent, roughly 4 years working for a very large manufacturing and distribution company. And so from that point on, I thought, well, this is a niche for me. I mean, I understand the lingo. I know how this works. And so almost from the very beginning, when I went out on my own, I specialized in tax purpose valuations. So in the United States, gift tax, estate tax, charitable contributions, S corporation elections. So tax purpose valuations, and probably 90% of my practice was only around manufacturing and distribution. And I just think, specialization is something that helped me gain expertise in positioning and traction early on for what I was doing.
Yeah, I think that specialization and is something that, I'm sitting in another part of the world. Yes, we have a practice in the US, and we see that big differentiation between the US and maybe some of the other countries, is that need for niche specialization is absolutely key. It's a big market, right? So you can build a successful business with that specialization. It's not always possible in other markets where maybe they're smaller and they're more diversified, but that's a key learning. And I think it's something we also look at when we're looking at businesses, right? How niche are they? How specialized are they? What sort of moat exists from your business to others? Rod, you're also a bit ahead of your time. And I think a lot of people know you probably as the traveling, I use an Australian term, what's it, Weibigo valuator. So you and your wife from 2010 to 2022. So even before COVID and before remote working was a thing, you basically ran your business full time from an RV. Okay, so your dogs and your RV. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, and when COVID did break out, Graham, my wife and I joked that we've been practicing social distancing for 10 years. So when it finally happened, it wasn't a big deal. But they're really, well, first of all, people, especially CPA types, are really afraid of trying something different. And frankly, I am too, but the fear of trying something new was outweighed by how bored I get with the status quo. And if I've been doing something for a while, I'm looking for another challenge. So that's part of that contributed to it. Another thing that I learned while we were traveling was that at that time, geography was becoming really irrelevant. Back when we started, we always needed to think, hey, I need to be in the town in which these businesses are located so that, it just makes things easier. And
Yeah.
I won't argue with that, but as time went on, geography became less and less of a barrier. And when I would get a potential, a referral source or a potential client call me, one of the first things I would tell them is, "Hey, look, I'm qualified and I would love to help you, but there's something you need to know. I travel full time in an RV, and I might be in Texas this week, but next week when we talk, I could be in Arizona or California or any place else in the United States or Canada." And nobody, to the best of my knowledge, Graham, I do not remember anybody hanging up the phone on me. Nobody saying, "Oh, well, that's great. Good for you, Rod, but we really want somebody in this city." I didn't do a lot of litigation work, so the whole trial prep and the proximity for that was not really necessary. And I just found that people didn't care. And if I can, Graham, I want to share one more thing about what contributed to the RV travel. And I had a really good friend. I considered him an older brother, who also happened to be a business valuation professional. And one day he called me and he said, "I've stopped renewing my subscriptions, my magazine subscriptions." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He was diagnosed with cancer. He lived with it for several years and he's no longer with us. But at the time, that had a big impact because, if I can get a little colloquial here, we all remember our college days where we drank too much and we were puking our guts out, praying to God, "Please make this better. And I promise never to do it again." And I had a similar come to Jesus moment. My wife and I looked at each other and we looked around at all the stuff that we had, and we realized that if our health became an issue, we would give it all up to have our health back. And so how important is all of this stuff that we're accumulating? What are we postponing? And that probably more than anything else is what pushed me over the edge to give this whole traveling from in an RV a try. So there is, it is really interesting. But there is kind of a somber background to the story to why it happened. And I will tell you, Graham, I mean, back in 2010, the getting the internet from an RV relied on the Verizon jetpack. It was like the deck of
standing
cards
on one leg, holding up the antenna.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it worked back in 2010. But as time went on, I mean, at the end, we had a really sophisticated setup to guarantee that we had great, great Wi-Fi signal with two different carriers just for the redundancy.
I love it. And nowadays, you don't even have to be in the same country. I mean, there's guys like Mike Blake out of Portugal and what have you. It's our business. We're across borders. The UK, the US, EMEA. You can literally be anywhere in the world nowadays. So
yes,
you were really, I guess, a pioneer in that sense, right? And an inspiration, I guess, to a lot of people down the line. So I want to move on a little bit, and before we get into the AI discussion, so you've been doing this for a good 20 years, traveling the world, or traveling the United States. And then you decided to pivot. I mean, I don't know if you got bored with valuations themselves, but at this point you decided you want to start coaching others and making AI the focus. And why the shift? And what did you see in the profession that drove that change?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when the first ChatGPT model came out in November of 2022, I was kind of enthralled by it. And I immediately saw, even back then, what this could do for our profession, because having done so many business valuations, I think there is so much of what we do that is very much necessary, but it is total busy work that adds little or no value to the client. So yes, we need to spread historical financial statements, provides no value to the client. Yes, we need to do our industry research and our economic overview. But that research in and of itself provides no value to the client. What it really does is gives us the background information that we need to start accumulating so that we
Yeah.
can exercise professional judgment. So the long and short of it is that I really saw AI as a way to remove some of the drudgery of doing valuation work. The end result is great. I mean, what we produce is great, but the messy middle is the problem, where we're doing all of this busy work that doesn't really add a lot of value to the clients. And so as time went on, from November of 2022, I started studying this more and more. So I was doing self-learning, a lot of experimentation. And in January of 2025, I launched my AI for BV newsletter. I specifically wanted people to know that this was only going to be for the BV profession, hence the name, because at the time, nobody else was doing it.
And again, niche. I mean, not AI for everyone, AI for BV. So it seems to be a theme that you
Yes.
that you've carried
I wish
through.
we had a larger niche. I wish there were more people, but it is what it is.
Well, I mean, if I remember correctly, there's about 4,000 BV professionals in the United States, maybe even more. I think you'll probably be closer to the numbers than I have. So I mean, there's a substantial number of people and practices that we're talking to, but it is, it's not 400,000.
No,
So
it
Rod,
is not like accountants, right?
exactly. So let's get into the heart of it. I want to start a little bit like why AI matters. You're a genuine advocate for AI and valuation, and I think you've been through the learning yourself. You've learned the hard lessons. You've been in the room. You've been in the steel manufacturer. So you've learned to think for yourself. But let's talk about AI. Why does it matter, and why does it matter now? You've touched on a little bit of it into your intro, but let's dive into that. And can a modern valuation practice actually operate without AI today? So let's start there.
So here's I'm a big reader, and I want to start off by saying, why AI in valuation? And again, what I just talked about earlier was really looking at AI from our perspective, a professional practitioner perspective. But let's look at it from the client perspective for just a minute. So the anecdote that I want to relate is a story. There's a gentleman named Peter Hurley. Peter Hurley is widely considered to be one of the world's best portrait photographers. He's done all of the celebrities, all of the industry titans, and he teaches thousands of students across the world how to do portrait photographer. And here's what he's saying to his students. If you can't beat AI in portrait photography, you won't get hired. And he's right. If you think about, portrait photography apps for your phone, they're already good enough for most people. But there will always be a subset of people who will pay a premium for that last mile that only a top photographer can deliver. And I think there's a really close parallel to BVFLS work. So back when I started coaching before AI, there was a lot of grumblings in our profession about all of these DIY valuation websites and garbage in and garbage out. But we were looking at it from our perspective. Some or many business owners believe that today AI-assisted valuation apps are good enough. And that might be because they don't know or understand what the last mile of the human in the loop difference or differentiation would mean to them. And that's not a business owner problem. That's not an AI problem. What it is a BVFLS practitioner education problem. And so if we can't demonstrably explain and beat AI assisted valuation apps by that last mile, we're going to lose ground to practitioners who can, many of whom are probably supplementing their work or augmenting their work with AI tools anyhow. And they're not just going to survive, they're going to thrive, because I believe, and I know this is a long answer, I believe the top 1% to 5% of BVFLSers in their respective fields of expertise will see a huge demand for their services while the rest get displaced by AI. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Very few business owners want a business valuation, but they're told that they need one for this or that compliance purpose. So they're being told that they need to spend money on something that they don't really want. And so that shifts the focus from value consciousness to price sensitivity. Hey, if I've got to get this done, I don't want to have to pay a lot of money for it. I'm going to go with the cheapest person. As the pool of people paying, of business owners paying for more human contact shrinks, all of their demand is going to be concentrated towards that 1 to 5% of the top BVFLS providers. And one more thing driving this is that, we're all hearing the term AEO, answer engine optimization, GEO, generative AI engine optimization. In the past, if somebody Googled business valuation in Philadelphia and I came up 10th on the list, I was probably going to get some work because I'm at least on the list. But the way people are asking questions of AI, hey, Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude, who is the best valuation expert specializing in manufacturers and distributors in Center City, Philadelphia? Only one answer is going to come up. I'm not saying that it's me anymore because I don't live in Philly, but that's the analogy. Like you're not getting, 10, 15, 20 blue links of practitioners in Philadelphia. You're getting one. And so I think all of this is really driving us to strongly consider the use of AI in our practices. And quite frankly, as we're talking, the other reason that really drives this is just the talent pool is shrinking in business valuations. I hear from so many small firms how difficult it is to hire at a reasonable salary someone that they can train to do business valuation. And especially for solo practitioners, AI can be that junior analyst if you let it.
Yeah, and I think, Rod, there's so many things you've touched on there. I mean, I can even relate to our business, how that human aspect is so important. What AI can't do is it can't, when a business owner is wanting to sell and get a sensible number, they can't console the business owner and say, look, your value is lower than what you think it is because you haven't done the following, but it's okay. If you take the time over the next 2 years to make these changes in your business, you can get there. Okay. So AI can't do that. It can't read the room. It can't do those things. But the other point I think you make is that the genie's out the bottle already. AI is here. It's here to stay. And as a practitioner, unless you figure out how to use that well and become one of the top 5%ers, okay, you are going to be disintermediated. That business owner, I mean, even in our business, we had a tool to answer the curious question, like, what's my business worth? And we've seen that part of the business has largely faded away. But what has become more important is like, sure, I'm going to potentially have a dispute and I want to know that I can stand behind this and somebody's going to be in my corner. Okay. That kind of work is actually commanding more of a premium. So, sitting, I guess, as a practitioner, we see that in our practice. And I think what you say is absolutely true. And then the last point, I guess, was a question is, can AI basically, be an equalizer for the small practices? We're not talking the big four, the big five, the Krolls of the world. We're talking about the 2, 3, 4-man practices. I think you touched on that. But I think, is it a threat or is it an opportunity? How do you see that?
I am probably an unabashed optimist for AI. I mean, I know that there's concerns, but as you pointed out, the genie's out of the bottle. There's no putting AI aside or putting it on hold because it's a worldwide phenomenon. And there are small firms that are practicing today without the benefit or use of AI. And the poll questions that I ask in my workshops will bear that out. But for all of the pearl clutching about AI, What I don't understand, and the admonition of, well, AI can't replace our professional judgment. First, I'm not saying it should ever replace our professional judgment, but I don't understand if professional judgment is your thing, then I don't understand why you wouldn't embrace AI to free you up from the busy work that doesn't provide value and give you more time to exercise the professional judgment that you're clinging to so precariously, you know?
Well, I guess, Rod, to interrupt you, back in 1978, you didn't have Excel. So if you were talking to a practitioner in 2000 and say, "Hey, you're going to do this with a notepad and an abacus," sorry, I'm joking, but it would be a similar discussion in many ways, right?
Right. The first electronic spreadsheet I used was VisiCalc. And I feel like your audience is going, okay, boomer. But that is, that came out in the early 80s. Then we went to Lotus 123, and then finally Excel came out.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think, you ask about small firms is, even though we may be reluctant, our end users are not. And if we don't start using AI, and we get questions about how we're using AI in our practice, and we say, oh, we're not using it, we do run the risk, and I don't know how great that risk is, but we do run the risk of being seen as not tech savvy or not cost conscious or both. And so I do think, to some extent it's inevitable, and I get it. I mean, the BV people are generally really good at their job. They have all these processes and procedures that they follow. And why do I need AI? I'm already good at this. And it's a throughput kind of a thing, not so that we can get more work out the door faster, although that's certainly part of it. It is getting more time to exercise the professional judgment that we hold so near and dear to our hearts. Just a quick story, Graham. I mean, back when I had my valuation practice in Center City, Philadelphia, I would deliver a valuation report to a client. And honestly, I didn't want to hang around, because my thought was, I've got 5 or 6 more projects back on my desk that I got to get to. So, sir, madam, here's your valuation report. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, but please don't call, because I've got this other work that I got to do. And, those are the kinds of things that I will say, because I've lived that, and I know that there are times, Graham, that I wished I would have had more time to spend on evaluation, because I was thinking there was so much more that I could have done. And AI, I think, facilitates that now. Hey, if I'm still going to spend 40 hours as a number on a project, maybe 20 of it was busy work and 20 of it was professional judgment. Now maybe 10 hours is busy work, and I gain an extra 10 hours to really think more about the project and deliver more value. And so I absolutely do believe that this is an equalizer for small firms.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on one other point is you made a little bit earlier, is the reality, and we said in our practice, is when we send out a valuation report or discuss with a client, the first thing they do invariably is go and put it into Claude or ChatGPT. And 20 minutes later, you get a list back of, hey, what about this question? And what about this? And what about that? So if you're not using it, your clients are going to use it 90% of the time. They're going to use it to test your judgment, your work, and best you be able to actually answer those questions with a degree of confidence and what have you. Else all your credibility is gone. So, I think that's another aspect in terms of AI.
Yeah.
Clients are going to use it either to disintermediate you, but in most instances is to actually check your work and sense check it and question you. So, yeah. Right.
And, go ahead.
Karen, you go for it.
Well, the other thing that I just want to say about it being an equalizer is I want small firms to think about something. The Big Four spent 2 years in committees and a fortune in time and money deciding, how to use AI. And this is something that a small firm can switch on for $20 a month this afternoon. So the AI technology isn't a moat anymore. it's table stakes. And, you know, a big four partner and a small firm practitioner, a small firm runner can basically be using the same playbook. And therefore, like, you know, the question is it an equalizer? Absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's move on to, I want to get a little bit specific here. And I want to understand a little bit what is AI? You've spoken about it gives you more time to exercise a professional judgment and all of that. But I want to understand in your experience, what does AI do really well? Where does it genuinely shine, you know, in evaluation workflow today? And on the other side of the coin is where does the human expert stay irreplaceable? So how do these work together to create a better outcome and a better project, a better, what do you call it, a better outcome? Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, sure. So let's take your first question first. Where does it shine in the workflow? And I basically think, you know, any kind of research that we're doing, so competitor research, industry research, economic overviews, and in the process, you could use it to save literally thousands of dollars in subscriptions to third-party services. You know, Perplexity is a great research source, even with the free account. I won't mention the third party, but there is one source and you get their industry data and it's a $4,000 subscription. So not only do you save time, but you can also save, you know, a lot of money with AI.
Sure.
I also think it's being used for data wrangling. So I've done workshops on how to extract financial data from bank statements, tax returns, financial statements, QuickBooks files. I mean, all of that tedious work, whether it was done by you or a junior analyst, you know, I remember getting financial statements and sitting down and having to manually retype all the numbers into my valuation spreadsheet. And so that all of the downstream tabs would run, the common size analysis, the ratio analysis, and et cetera. One of my best attended monthly workshops was on data extraction. You know, so I just ran a bunch of very simple prompts. This was before Claude Code and Claude Cowork, and now Codex and OpenAI's ChatGPT work. This was just basic ChatGPT and basic Claude when I demonstrated this. And, you know, it worked pretty flawlessly in terms of taking those PDFs or bank statements or credit card statements and extracting that data out into Excel as our starting point. And frankly, there's a lot of time associated with doing that. And AI would do it in minutes.
And it doesn't take away the need to do a review and double check it and fact check it and all that, but it does 80% of the heavy lifting quickly. So you can sense check, and I guess also things like picking up patterns. You know, if you're doing, you know, have I missed something? You're asking those kind of questions is really powerful. You know, because you can't cover off all those things. It does those things really well in our experience.
Right. And so, you know, to me, the big unlock has been when AI came out, we all talked about it as if it were another tool in our toolkit, like Excel. But the models have progressed to a point now where they are collaborators. You don't need this, you know, huge, complicated, multi-step prompt to get what you want. You can simply type in with today's models, hey, I want to accomplish this task. Give me step-by-step instructions on how to do it. So, you know, it's becoming more of a collaborator and less of a tool. But I think, you know, where humans will be irreplaceable, to me, there's three core activities that we do in any professional service practice. We do marketing to spread the word about who we are and what we do. We sell. We want to convert interested prospects into paying clients. And then we deliver. You know, we deliver our report to those paying clients. And I would say anywhere in that marketing, selling, delivery chain of processes, anywhere where the human touch is necessary, particularly in marketing and selling, and professional judgment, which you mostly would see in delivery, is necessarily a less likely candidate for AI intervention. So I don't really tell people that they can use AI to even write a report. It can be used for drafting, it can be used for reviewing, but now you have this AI detection software which is raising an ugly cloud if your report will probably be run through an AI detection service or software. And so I've always been a really good writer, Graham. I don't use AI to write my LinkedIn posts, to write my newsletter. I would certainly, I might consider it for drafting a valuation report if I was a terrible writer, which most BV people are. One of the things I do in my coaching practice is I will review draft reports, valuation reports, before they get sent out as a final. And so often I see that the authors are struggling to string together a subject, a verb, and an object in a coherent sentence that, for them, AI would really be a benefit.
Yeah, I think it levels the playing field in that sense. But as I said, there's no replacement there for knowing how to write well. I think something else I just want to touch on very quickly is if you're using these tools in small practices, you need to be intentional about training junior members of your team and that, so I guess I'm not quite at this. I'm a Gen X, not a boomer, but we still grew up in that era where you had to learn, you had to do the heavy lifting, you had to do the photocopying, you had to do all of those things.
Yes.
And the one thing we see as a real risk is that junior people have AI replace their thinking. So you have to be really intentional now about building capability in junior team members. Have them write reports, have them do that stuff, actually do the heavy lifting. Yes, use AI as the review tool, as you say, because else we're going to have a big gap in the profession 5, 6, 7, 8 years henceforth, where all the boomers and all the experts are dead, and the youngsters haven't learned the skills.
Well, and Graham, as a boomer, it never occurs to me to use AIs because I'm lazy about thinking. I'm still using it primarily as a productivity collaborator.
Correct.
So again, going back to that industry research, so many of us rely on one third-party source, and there's a couple of really well-known sources of industry information, just as an example. And we look at that one source, and our professional judgment is limited to that one source. But with a tool like Perplexity or even ChatGPT or Claude, having it go out and get so much more information about the industry than you're getting from that one report allows me to think more. To me, there's no thought in entering a prompt that says, get me all of the industry information for 3D printing kind of a thing. It's what I do with that afterwards that I'm not abdicating to artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. So I want to move on a little bit, and I'm conscious of the time. We've got about another 10 minutes left, but I want to talk firstly just about the toolkits, what you see, what you're using and why, which of the tools, and which are the ones you reach for first. And then I want to just kind of close off around what the guardrails, the perils, and the defensibility are. We didn't touch on that, but what is the sort of the dark side to this and what makes people nervous? But let's start with the toolkit first, right? What are the tools that you're using? There's also a lot of noise out of there. So what do you reach for first, and what are the things that you perhaps avoid?
Sure. So this one tool is going to roll in several things, the guardrails and, the toolkit that I would reach for. I know that ChatGPT or Claude, they get the most headlines, but I think for BVFLS work, the number one most overlooked tool for our profession is NotebookLM. And NotebookLM is a Google product. But the real benefit of it is that it does not go out and make up, it does not go out to the web and make up information. You load in your very specific sources. And if your source information is really, really good, then any query that you give NotebookLM should be grounded in that reality. It's not going to hallucinate because it's only going to your source documents that you handpicked and uploaded. And so, there is a free version of NotebookLM, again, a Google product, but, does not matter for what, for the output that we would be wanting to generate from it. And so I think that is the number one tool that I would recommend to a practitioner. There's no cost. It's free. The free version is just great. And if you scroll down into the NotebookLM homepage, it will tell you that right out of the box, they do not use your data to train the model. And I know that that's a big concern.
Confidentiality and all those things, which are often a question raised, are you loading proprietary information into this kind of model and compromising your client's confidentiality? Are NDAs at risk? I guess that's one of the ways that gets addressed. I mean, just an interesting little anecdote in that one of our clients is actually in the AI space, but they operate in the aeronautic space and in the defense space. And they've been doing AI for 25 years. So where if there's a failure in a system on an airplane, okay, you can't rely on open source models. So I think what's happened is AI has become popular now, but AI has been around for a long time. But previously it was only the domain of, let's call it, these closed loop and very special things. And in the BVLS space, a lot of it is a bit like, you got to think about it like you would from a aeronautics perspective, where you can't have an hallucination in terms of, an aeroplane system, for instance. It's got to almost be foolproof, right? So let's move on to some of those guardrails and those perils, so to speak. I mean, I think that would be an interesting way to kind of close out, right?
Yeah. Okay. So at the end of the day, I don't want to mitigate. I don't want to push off anybody's concerns about using AI, but I do think that all of the problems that they cite are solved or solvable. What do I mean by that? So, for example, if you're worried about data sharing, as an example, well, number one, every one of us is in the Microsoft ecosystem, right? I don't know what assurance we have from Microsoft that all of the client confidential data that we're uploading into Word and Excel and PowerPoint is not being used by them to shape the product offerings of, again, Word, Excel, So how do we know that Microsoft isn't doing exactly what we're afraid that AI labs are doing with our data? So that's number one. Number two is, if you are only going to go with the free plan, then your data might be shared to train that model, because if you're not paying for it, you're not the customer. You're the product. Exactly. So my first piece of advice would be, go out and pay at least $20 a month. There's a huge difference between the free tier and even the $20 a month paid tier. And once you get into the realm of a paid tier, there are settings that you can click on Gemini, on Claude, on ChatGPT that says, don't use my data to train the model. And again, I'm not sure what more assurance than that we need, because again, I don't know what we get from Microsoft as an example. And earlier when I mentioned that I did that data extraction workshop, I did that in front of, a group of people on Zoom. I used my QuickBooks file. I used my credit card statements. I used my bank account statements to show how data could be extracted from them, just to show people that I'm not afraid of using my own personal information in an AI tool to get the outcome that I'm looking for.
Yeah. As I say, I think you've got to be, you need to take precautions, but you also need to be pragmatic about that. And you also need to know, I guess, when it comes to defensibility and all of that sort of stuff, you have to know, and this is where professional judgment comes in, right? If you're standing in front of a judge, for a defensibility issue on a tax matter or IRS, you got to make damn sure that everything's been fact checked. But you would do that irrespective, whether it was an AI generated, or you had a research team that was pulling the stuff together out of books in a library, so to speak. So I don't think the principles change. And it's not a shortcut to obfuscating from peer review and all of those sorts of things. Those things happen irrespective, right, Rod? Well, they should happen in any
Yeah,
good practice.
yeah, and I think another really good thing to remember, Graham, is that the tasks that you and I and that our audience would be using AI for are kind of on the mundane side. I mean, we're not trying to launch rockets or solve decades old math problems or map genomes.
Yeah.
Our questions are kind of routine. And
Mm.
all of the leading, what we call frontier models. So again, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, they're all converging. And so there will always be some leapfrogging going on. Like, ChatGPT 5.6 came out, which is now better than Opus 4.8. And so there's
In
always
three
that.
weeks, Claude's going to be better or whatever.
Yeah. So their capabilities, especially for what the average BV user needs, are, again, going back to what we said earlier, are good enough. We don't need the leading edge model. And I think that's good to remember. So when it comes to picking a tool, once you get beyond NotebookLM, I think like the choice between ChatGPT and Claude could come down to how you feel about it personally. I mean, I know that there's people out there that think Claude is a better writer. I have not found that to be the case personally. ChatGPT writes in the style that I write in, abrupt, short sentences, just the facts. And so Claude is too verbose for me. But that's my personal preference. It doesn't mean that
some of it's preference, right? Do you prefer Ford or do you prefer Chevrolet or do you prefer Toyota? It's they're all great cars. It's just personal preference sometimes, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Rod, we need to wrap up, and we do two things to wrap up. I want to, leave our listeners, if there's a valuation professional listening in, if there's one takeaway they can take from the conversation, and then we're going to do a quick rapid fire. It's literally just 5 fun questions just to hear a little bit more about you. But if you can leave one thought for our listeners that they can take away from the conversation, what would that be?
I think it's mostly for the people that are not using AI yet. The longer that you or they wait to become proficient, the harder it's going to be to catch up with the peers who started even a month ago and certainly a year ago. And if you want, if you really want to distinguish yourself via exercising professional judgment, I think AI creates more time for that. It's a value add, not a value subtract. And if you're going to hang your hat on professional judgment, AI clears more space for it.
Fantastic. It sounds like a Nike ad. Just do it. Get started, start using, play around, experiment. And then I guess join one of your workshops or sign up for your newsletter. I mean, we'll get to that in a sec. But Rod, we're going to do our quick rapid fire questions. 5 questions, 1 answer, whatever comes to mind as quickly as possible. And we do this with all our guests. So the first one is one book you think every BV practitioner, business owner should read?
I think it's The Business of Expertise by David Baker. I have not found a better book for assessing expertise and positioning your practice.
Fantastic. Okay. The most overused word or cliche in a valuation report?
I assumed.
I assumed.
Which I teach, like these people, like they say, I assumed. It's like, hey, you've got access to the client, pick up the phone or send an email. Don't assume, verify, get the data.
I'd love to hear that in front of a judge if you're an expert witness. I assumed you're going to be ripped to shreds, right? The one AI tool, I think you've answered this, that you would struggle to work without.
Well, for my practice, the coaching and the newsletter, I mean, I'm really big into Claude Cowork now. But again, if someone's just getting started, I think the number one tool is NotebookLM.
NotebookLM. Okay, we're going to put that in the notes. Excuse the pun. So,
okay.
The best place, and this is a completely different question, the best place you discovered in 12 years in your camper van on the road?
So I'm an outdoors person, and state-wise, I really liked Colorado and the Rocky Mountains. There's nothing that I found as breathtaking. The other one is the Pacific coast of the state of Oregon. When you drive along the beach road of Oregon, it's all public land, so there's nothing private, it's nothing closed. You could literally walk from the north end to the south end of the state or vice versa and not have to divert. I mean, and the coastline is just beautiful. And that being said, clearly I've landed in Bisbee, Arizona, but it's basically because of the year-round climate that we have in this city.
Clearly, you haven't been to Cape Town yet, because you might change your opinion when you drive along the peninsula. But I'd love to do the trip up the West Coast. I mean, I think that sounds incredible. Last sentence. Finish the sentence. In 5 years' time, the valuation expert who thrives is the one who.
I think it's the one who truly loves the work and learns how to value price.
Love that. Right. I mean, I think this chat has just been fantastic. I think just your authenticity, your passion for what you do. And I think it's generally useful for, whether you're a BVLS professional or whether you're a business owner, I think it's equally relevant. So where can people find you, your work? How can they get hold of you if they need to reach out to you, right?
Well, I think, if you want to email me, it's rod@rodburkert.com. Rodburkert.com is the domain where you can go to my website, sign up, see what I have to offer, subscribe to my newsletter. And, it's kind of, as you pointed out at the top of the podcast, I'm really active on LinkedIn. I post almost every day. And so, if you want to DM me on or reach out to me on LinkedIn, that would be another platform.
Fantastic, Rod. It's been an absolute pleasure. And that's it for this episode of the BizVal podcast. If you found it valuable and you enjoyed it, please share it with as many people as possible. If you didn't like it, don't tell anyone. So that's it for the BizVal podcast, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks so much for having me again, Graham.
Cheers, Rod. Thank you.